how are you gonna, do you know how to record it and stuff like that?
Yeah, I'm already recording it.
Okay. I just right when I said that, I moved the mouse and I looked up and it said recording. I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
I know how to do it here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of know how to use this program. I've never done it before. I've seen some other
Dude, it's
people
blowing
use it.
up after the whole Corona going
It would
on.
have been
So.
smart to buy some stock in this one at first.
Yeah, it would have been really smart. My buddy just got a job there. He said, yeah, dude, like,
Oh, too? Really?
promoted quick, you know, I'm moving up the
Yeah, I don't
ranks.
know. Whoever had this idea, they capitalized on it really well.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that like Skype and all that other stuff just didn't do
Skype should
well.
have been, you would think Skype would be the main one to say, all right, let's shoot ourselves in there. We're like the most popular. And then all of a sudden Zoom, I've never heard of Zoom.
Yeah. No, there was another one that I don't know if your professors had you use it, where they were having Maddie use it, and it was like it was for test taking, and they like, it tells if your eyes are looking at the screen.
It's a proctored, yeah.
God.
Some classes here. I'm doing 2 grad classes right now, but it's just research. So I'm just, whenever I need to, I'll go into lab and do my research. But one of my other buddies he's like, yeah, I got an exam today. I'm studying all this stuff. So I'm like, okay, you know, he's like, yeah, it's proctored. So I'm like, okay. So and he said, yeah, I have to have like a 3x5 mirror. And I'm like,
that's so weird.
what do you, and he didn't know. I have to ask him because that's the last time I talked to him. But
yeah,
I think he put the mirror right here so they could see if they're, you know, what they're looking at. No switching.
That's so weird. Yeah, no, they had her, she had to have 2 devices, which I'm like, you require a student to have, and she had to have one camera set up at her, and then the computer, and then the proctor on the computer, and it's like ridiculous. And it's like, what if you like look away from the screen at any point? It'll take you out of the test.
It'll probably be, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's
what if
you
grab like your water or something and you're like, oh, shit,
exactly,
water, you know?
It's totally flawed. I mean, I don't know, they're still figuring out. You were still able to go to lab all this time though? Like, were you able to go to school, or was it like?
So what happened was after spring break, it was we took our last final before spring, or not our final, but like a midterm before spring break, and it was a Friday, and a lot of classes have already been shut down. But since, you know, I don't know why, but a lot of science classes have like their midterms and stuff on Fridays, because a lot of business, all those, they don't have classes on Fridays. So it's nice. So they went to spring break early, and then we went to take the test, and that's when it was starting to get kind of more serious, and they're talking about shutting down or moving to online learning. And a lot of other people in different schools, they already had the online learning. So we're like, us eventually. And then
especially if you have lab.
Right, exactly. And I thought it was weird. I just thought it was funny because I remember we were taking the midterm, and one girl coughed, just like a cough, and everybody was just like, oh,
oh shit. But, I know, I was thinking about that when it first happened. Like, if someone sneezes in the store, I'm like, don't cough. You're gonna like get.
I'd be at like restaurant, or like recently, and or like a plane. So I went to Chicago during spring break, and I remember just being on the plane, and I'd have to cough because I had something in my throat, and I just nope, I'm not gonna cough.
No, I took a plane to Arizona, and someone was just straight up coughing all the time. I'm like, hey guys,
hey, can we get like some
emergency exit? Can we just open the door, throw them out?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's the craziest part, when you hear somebody cough and it's kind of consistent, and everybody's like, yo.
No, they didn't. I don't know if your plane is different. They didn't even like. We were sitting right next to each other. Like,
yeah. So I went in March, but we were sitting literally almost side by side, and they're like, hey, we got some extra seats. You want to sit there? And
so, you went in March. Yeah, it didn't get even bad till like later on. I had to wear a mask and everything.
The late March, early April, because I was in San Diego for about a few days for spring break, and then everything started shutting down in San Diego. So it looked like a ghost town. So we're like, all right, well, we could early.
That was like my worst. That was like my worst fear, because I was like going to the gym, and I was like, just at least let me have the gym, because I was doing contest prep. I was like, just let me have the gym. And the gym shut down. I was like, fuck.
Yeah. Once it shut down, even here, we came back from spring break. We're like, all right, we'll do like a gym in the basement, and we got dumbbells from like 5 to 40.
There you go.
We bought like the pull-up bar with the dips. We got one of those. We had a bunch of bands, and try to get creative.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah,
a lot of work and stuff like that. But
I don't know. I felt like after a while, like not training in the gym kind of sucks though. Like, it kind of got to me after a while. I missed the gym so bad.
Yeah. You get back into it, and it's just totally different. I mean, the Reno gyms, they're starting to open back up and stuff like that. So
yeah, you were telling me. I mean, when did that start happening?
So that started on the second phase. Yeah, the second phase, which was not this past Monday, but the Monday before. So about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, that's what confuses me about California, because Friday, excuse me, Friday was supposed to be our second phase, but they said gyms were supposed to open in that, restaurants, and it's like they're just taking a long time because I work in a restaurant, and the restaurant we can only do outdoor seating right now.
Yeah.
And
gym orders, right?
Yeah, they've been doing takeout like this whole time, which I mean is the only way to keep the business like open, really.
Yeah, it would be
but,
from here, yeah.
But yeah, no, it's kind of frustrating because I was like just in Arizona training. I'm like, I'll go back, take a couple of weeks, and then it'll open back up. And
right. I think it's all dependent on like the cases and stuff. But
the cases, the governor too, I think runs a lot of orders, and the county decides as well.
Yeah,
so I don't know. I don't know why they're lagging here, but it kind of sucks.
I know it's taken a while, but especially with everything going on now, like who knows? You know, everybody's been out and stuff like that. So technically, it's going to be interesting to see. My dad said he's been watching the news, and there's been like a 25% increase in cases in the states that did reopen.
Yeah. I don't know. That's my worst fear. So we do this shit again. Like,
it seems like it's kind of a hard solution to fix. So it seems like you're gonna have to wait till like in my head, it's like if you don't want cases to come up, then it's gonna have to kind of wait till like a vaccine comes out.
Yeah, but then even then, it's like, what then? Does the virus mutate by then?
Like, it's flu. That's another part. Is the virus? Same thing with the flu. Like when people say, "Oh, well, it's like the flu." You know, you get a new vaccine for the flu every year. You know, and you're like, "Oh, well, why do you get a new vaccine for the flu?"
It's a new strain, right?
Because it's a new strain. Yeah, the strain adapts, and people. You know what I'm saying? It's a living organism, so it'll adapt and adapt and adapt and find a way to survive in it. And so I'm assuming it's going to work the same with COVID. I'm assuming that you're going to it's going to be a vaccine that comes out almost every year, depending on how it goes. I mean, it's going to, because the strains, it's shown that some of the strains have already adapted and are getting different and different. That's why
different.
Sick, they're checking the antibodies, and they're like, oh, this guy has the antibodies for the old COVID,
but not the new. Yeah, I've heard about that.
Here,
wait, let me introduce the podcast so we can keep talking about this, because I feel like totally.
I feel like it's relevant. Yeah,
definitely. All right, wait, I got my dog here. Okay, shoot, what's the podcast? It's called Conscious. Okay, how do other people introduce their podcast? I don't know.
Dude, that's what I'm saying. You know what it usually looks like? It's always the sit down, you know. I don't know what kind of podcast you listen to, but it's always like a Joe Rogan, you know. They're sitting down, they're talking, they're doing like a little clip it, and then they come in with like an intro.
Yeah.
And then it just goes from the, you know.
We'll do it here. All right, how's it going, everybody? This is going to be episode number 1 of the Conscious Bodybuilding podcast. So we have myself, Dylan Gwen, and my guest today, Matthew Bolino. Kind of part of the reason why I have Matthew on today is because, one, we go way back. I mean, I've known you since I was really, really little.
Yeah.
Maddie was telling me one of my questions should be to you. One of our questions for the podcast is what is my earliest memory of us? And not my earliest memory, but I remember at some point I like punched you in the back of the head. And I can't remember why.
That was like the mid stage, you know. We had different chapters. It was really funny.
Yeah, I know, because we skateboarded together. We hung out as kids because our dads were friends, and then skateboarded, and then it kind of came full circle because now we're both, you know, like bodybuilding, like training. I think we're both kind of in the realm of like wanting to explore obviously you're much deeper in than I am, of exploring the science-based. I was more bro science for a long time, but I've started to adopt some of that. But that's kind of why I have Matthew on today, is because that's the whole goal of this podcast. The reason it's called Conscious Bodybuilding is that it's conscious. Like, it's not something we do passively. There's method to everything you do. You don't just do stuff based on anecdote and things like that.
Right.
But basically, so yeah, we were talking about the coronavirus. Do you have any insight from your, like, I don't know, education based on this situation?
Yeah, so I remember I took a class, it's immunology. So it kind of explains everything about the immune system, virology, certain things like that. With something like with this virus, especially with COVID, one thing that I noticed is that the whole, you could be asymptomatic. You know, you don't really see that in any other viruses. HIV, measles, smallpox, chickenpox, the flu, the common cold. You have some sort of symptoms. You're coughing. You know, you're getting a fever. So it's strange to me because I started giving it thought. I don't know if it has anything to do with like any science, because we really don't know too much about it yet. it's all experimental. I actually just read a study not too long ago. It was saying that when you're asymptomatic, the probability of you spreading it is very rare as well. So it's
I heard that too, and I heard that Fauci kind of like walked back on that statement, which is it's very like weird, because like I feel like him and WHO and CDC, they all kind of like are just contradicting each other in a lot of ways. So
that's the interesting part about science, is you really have to follow the data. It's all experimental.
Right.
So it's very crazy how it works, because sometimes, for example, I'm in my lab, we're following I have a certain project, and we're following it, and we're looking at some of the data, and we're like, okay, well, that contradicts this part of the data. It should have done something else, but it did, it did what we didn't expect it to do. So
yeah, but you have to be, I think a lot of what I'm, experienced too, is you have to be willing to accept that that's a possibility. Like a lot of people are attached to this idea, and then once something challenges your thought, you're just like, nope, I'm gonna. Some people just double down on their original idea, and it's like, no, like, and you've had there's a lot of problems with that.
Yeah, that's the beauty about science, because there's a lot of misconceptions that I'm starting to realize in bro science and certain sciences, because there are all these things on. I used to be a big YouTube guy. All right, well, let's see what YouTube says about it. We'll watch a few videos. You have certain people like, you have like the Jim Stepanis. He's got a PhD. He has all this stuff, and then you got these other guys that are really big. They're jacked. They look great. And they're saying, oh, well, this is what's going on. And you're like, well, I'm going to take his word for it because he looks great,
Yeah.
But there's so many things that I've noticed watching some of their videos that I'm like, well, that's not consistent with what the science says.
Exactly. Well, and so what I've noticed, the way I used to do bodybuilding is like, I would go on YouTube and I would find who I wanted to look like. I'd be like Jay Cutler, and I would search Jay Cutler and I would watch all of his videos.
Yeah.
And one thing I've noticed looking back on that is some of those things worked for me, some of them didn't. But one thing I've noticed is that now that I'm starting to understand more of the science, is that a lot of the things that like they all did, like there's parallels between all of them that you realize, oh, he uses a certain amount of volume with his training. And he, like Jay Cutler was saying recently, oh, I don't even train to failure. And it's like, now that science is coming out saying, oh, training to failure is actually not the best way to do it, and you're like, oh, that makes sense. And then they do some other odd things that maybe they were able to get away with. Like, I mean, Ronnie Coleman is a like terrible example when people are like, oh yeah, like I'm going to train like Ronnie or whatever. And it's like Ronnie's recovery capabilities are probably far beyond any human being we've ever observed. So he's an anomaly. So and that's another thing to look at too, is like a lot of these people who are giving advice are sometimes the genetically elite. So what works for them isn't going to work for general population, right? Unless you are one of those people. So
a lot of
that's why I was going to say, that's why anecdote is so hard alone to diagnose things and to draw conclusions on. But on what you were saying too, it's like especially with training, people have their ego tied up in a lot of the time. You have this thing that you identify with and that you practice, and it's really hard to remove yourself from it. If someone comes along and says, hey, maybe trying it this way, some people are like, well, no, this is my method and I have to do it this way. And that's but the whole YouTube, you just got to know where to look. It's really difficult, because you can get sucked into some really bad advice.
Oh yeah, I see it all the time too, especially with new lifters too. When people are starting to work out, and they go to a friend usually, or especially in fraternities at least, it happens all the time. They're like, oh, well, come lift with me. I'll show you how to lift. I'll show you how to get big. All this stuff, and they're two different people. You got one kid that's just very skinny in this, and then you got one guy that seems like he's building muscle fast. He's eating whatever he wants. He's training. He doesn't know what he's doing, but he's training hard. So, and then this other guy hops on, and doesn't understand. Oh, well, I'm not getting as big as you. Like, I'm eating good, and that's another huge thing you always hear. Oh yeah, I'm eating a lot, but they really aren't eating that much. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're really not eating much. They're not really following what they need to follow in terms of well, if you need to get like this, there's certain things you have to do. There's certain things you need to understand. A lot of people don't understand certain. Oh well, how does insulin work? How does testosterone work?
Right. Well, and it's like I think the best thing is getting people pointed in the right direction early on, like getting them to the right resources, getting them to the proper information, because maybe some of those things are like insulin, and some of that may be a little bit over their head. But that being said, I think that there are definitely people out there that they can, if you do a YouTube search, you're going to get the most popular videos. And a lot of the time that isn't like who's trending right now, like Greg Doucette, and it's just all bro science. Like it's no,
it is.
I think that's one of the things I do is like, maybe I'm not, if I don't know something super well, I just like, hey, just look at these videos, look at this guy, look at this researcher, and you'll get a lot of the information. Sorry, my dogs are fighting in the
No, you're good. You're good.
But yeah, so I just wanted to get a little bit of information. You talked about immunology. What you always tell me about school. What exactly are you studying? Like, you have like 4 different things going on,
right? So,
and kind of what is the end goal as far as that goes?
Okay. So pretty much it started in kind of high school. I was coming to college. I was that's when lifting was really starting to start for me. So I was like, okay, well,
yeah,
kind of smaller guy. It started with football. I'm like, oh, I gotta get big. I gotta get big for football.
Right.
I was tiny. I was like maybe 150, 160 pounds playing on varsity as a quarterback. That never works out very well. So it started there. I was like, all right, well, let's see what I could do. And I took anatomy and I took certain.
Right. I remember around like junior, senior year, you started like asking me questions about stuff more often. Then I realized this is getting kind of serious.
Yeah. Yeah, because it all started with that. I said, all right, well, I'm doing what certain people on YouTube are saying, or I think I am. Maybe I think I am. And then that's when I started researching. All right, well, how do muscles even build? How does this happen in your body? So then once I got into when I got to college, I was like, all right, well, I want to do biochemistry, because biochemistry, from what I've researched and what I've known is for medical school, at least, because that was my first initial option. I was like, maybe I'll go to medical school, do endocrinology. I wanted to do endocrinology. I love the hormones for some reason. So I was like, all right, well, we'll start with that. And then I ended up following biochemistry. I did biochemistry all 4 years. Recently, this semester, I switched over to biotechnology, which is kind of like the add-on to biochemistry. So it's like following all the technologies that they're using now, especially because it helps in my lab a lot. And then I just received my bachelor's in biochemistry and biotechnology. So then now I'm enrolled in the program, in the biotechnology master's program. But from there, since biotechnology, biochemistry, it's so broad. You got virology, immunology, pathology. You have so many things you could go into.
Right. My girlfriend is doing pathology. So
pathology, pathology side too. Immunology would probably go hand in hand with almost all those.
Right. Oh yeah. So she talks about a lot of this stuff similarly you do as well.
Yeah.
What exactly is biochemistry, like as defined, and biotechnology? Because I kind of have an understanding of it, but I think a lot of people don't even have a clue.
Right. So biochemistry is all the biological functions that happen in your body, which is beyond there's like metabolism, for example. I like using this example because I like metabolism. Metabolism, if you were to look at the pathways that metabolism takes, it looks like a roadmap. There's so many different things you could do, and it all starts with what you're ingesting, like certain foods. Glucose is the central molecule. So what it's looking at, especially in biochemistry, what I really took out of it was, well, when we're eating, when we're working out, what's happening, what's really going on in our body.
Mechanism of what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people, and this is a hard part to pick up. This is a hard part that I had to do with college is all almost pathways. Let's say I eat like a gummy bear, that'll probably be the simplest pathway. It's a simple sugar. It's almost straight pure glucose. Your body will take that and just turn it right into energy. But say you a grain of rice or a few grains of rice and stuff like that, it's the same carbohydrate, but it's more complex. It takes longer to break down. It goes through more steps. So it's
hormonal responses too.
Oh yeah, by far, right. So that's the common misconception is, okay, well, I'm going to eat this gummy bear. This is going to be one thing. But remember, it's spiking insulin. It's doing that. There's more than one function that's going down while you're breaking down the ATP. You're breaking down the glucose. You're trying to get energy from it. So, which ties almost hand in hand a lot in terms of lifting, because a lot of people, when they lift, they always think, oh, but I'm working out hard. They never say, oh, but my diet's really good. My nutrition's really good. I'm capitalizing on nutrient timing. That's a huge thing that I've been kind of in, because one thing I forgot to mention, I was doing a nutrition bachelor's as well.
You mentioned that,
yeah. So I was doing bachelor's nutrition as well, and I did a few classes, which was great. But I would have been here for another 5th year, so I was just kind of like, you know what, I'll stick to this. And we'll move on. We'll get more like kind of focused on certain things like that.
Most definitely.
Now I'm doing my master's, but it's biotechnology. So the difference in biotechnology is there's a lot of technologies. I don't know if you've heard of like 23andMe, Ancestry.com.
Yeah, one of the ones, Crispr, I think you mentioned before.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it's really cool. So certain technologies are coming out, and one field that I'm starting to get really interested in, I took a class last semester, and it was based on pretty much genome sequencing technologies. So you got, for example, PacBio, which is a DNA sequencing technology. You got some other ones, but what it's doing is we're composed of DNA, right? We have 8 million nucleotide base pairs with DNA, and it's a set of instructions that make you, that make me, that make everybody, which is really cool.
Right.
So what they're doing now is they're sequencing people's genomes, which is the complete set of genes in a person that makes up you, and they're looking at little problem areas. For example, like genetic disorders. There's a lot of things that don't have cures, and now especially we're using treatment options. Oh, you're diagnosed with this, you're diagnosed with that. This is the treatment. But with certain technologies, especially genome sequencing, let's say I sequence your whole genome, we could find problem areas in certain genes. Like, ooh, here you're expressing a certain amount of this gene that could potentially lead to blah, blah, blah. So the good part of that is, yeah, it might be, there's a lot of ethical issues with it, but the main thing that I think it's going to revolutionize medicine, what's going to happen is they're going to start sequencing people's genomes and say, all right, well, you have problem areas in certain genes that could lead to cancer, this or that. This is how we could prevent it. So it's more of a preventative stage. This is what you can get. This is how we could prevent it and treat it, versus, all right, you just got diagnosed with this. Let's look at our treatment options.
Yeah.
So it seems like the biggest problem with it right now is there's a bunch of small little technical issues, false positive readings where it might say, oh, well, it looks like you might be susceptible to this, but it actually just read it wrong, and you're not, and then there's false negatives which say, no, everything looks great, but it might have misread that certain genome or that area where it said, oh, actually, no, you are susceptible to this. So what's nice about that is a lot of people don't understand the role genetics plays in a lot of different like areas of I can't even say it, physiology. Like in terms of bodybuilding, in terms of weightlifting and stuff, genes play a pretty heavy role depending on who you are.
Most definitely. I didn't even really start to understand that until one, I've coached a good amount of people now, and myself included, and it's like there's so many things that influence like how you react to nutrition, how you react to drugs, how you react to training. I mean, like you can't take any one program and just lift it and put it, and that's exactly what I was talking about with doing Jay Cutler's workouts. It's like that worked for him, but like everybody's very individual, so and individual genes, it's hard to take that and look. And so I think that's a really that's got to be really promising for the future. And obviously I think with new sciences there's a lot there's always tends to be some what's it called, like ethical arguments for certain things like that. Especially, I mean, it's like you're making a designer human, right? Like
designer babies are things that are starting to come out. They're talking about the potential of going into your a human's genome, cutting out certain genes that they don't want, using enzymes, because a lot of things work on its own, but now they're talking about like, oh, well, if you want blue eyes, we could go into the genome, cut out certain genes or turn on certain genes using like epigenetics and certain techniques to make your eyes, and at that point you got to figure out, all right, well, where should we draw the line?
So I mean, I think, I don't know, I really couldn't even comment where to draw the line. I think maybe it would be an individual decision. Like I think that's kind of like always been my belief is, you can kind of just decide for yourself, as long as, maybe that's not imposed on people as much. Right. But I just thought of a bunch of questions piggybacking off of that now that you say that. So one, how would we take someone's genes out? Like how would we do that? And then just to be, okay, go ahead.
Right. So basically what it is we have, like I said, 8 million nucleotide base pairs. So it'll be more like how methylation, there's certain things that tighten and loosen the genome, and that causes expression. So let's say you have, for example, I have brown eyes, right? So that means the gene for brown eyes in me is more loosened. So it's maybe acetylated, or what it means is it's being expressed. So that's why I have, and then my blue eye gene, my green eye gene, they're suppressed because they're methylated, so they're tightened. So when you tighten the DNA, it lowers expression. So what they're saying is like my genome, at least in my DNA, it shows, well, blue eyes here, but it's so tightened and methylated, I don't express blue eyes. But what they could do now is they could go in with certain enzymes. I'm not too familiar with Cas9, which is CRISPR, but that's one of the proteins. It works as an enzyme. It cuts certain restrictions on the DNA, and it'll either loosen it, and that'll change expression in certain types of genes. There's some genes in there, like let's say for hair, eyes, certain things, height. Those genes are what I'm talking about in terms, because there's certain things called epigenetics. So epigenetics, what it is, it's like diet, your environment, what you're doing, weightlifting, exercise. It slowly changes in the genome. So let's say I eat like complete shit, right? I'm eating whatever the hell I want. I get more fat. That's part of epigenetics. It's going to change the way my body, kind of works. It might increase more enzymes to break down food. It might change up the lipid profile to retain more fat or to do this. But then let's say, for example, you're lifting, you're working out hard, you're eating good, your environment isn't too hot. That's another role in epigenetics. Your body starts to see that, starts to adapt, and starts to say, all right, well, this is what he's doing. Let's turn on more of these genes to help him, let's say, build more muscle. He's eating good. Let's turn on digestive genes more to help break down the food, the nutrients, stuff like that.
Right. I just read about this the other day. I just got actually right here. I actually recommend you read this book too. Brad Schoenfeld. I don't know if you've heard of Brad Schoenfeld. I was reading about myostatin in there. This book is literally just all the recent research in muscle hypertrophy. Yeah. And it was talking about myostatin, and one of the last studies that was quoted was saying that when you exercise, you inhibit the myostatin gene, and they've shown that myostatin inhibition is common amongst people who resistance train. And I had no idea. I mean, I totally thought myostatin was like just
kind of set there, yeah.
Is set the, and they just you have the Belgian blue cow or whatever, right. And that's just that's it. And then maybe Ronnie Coleman. It's like, yeah, and you're just it's either inhibited or it's not. And I just thought, I didn't really think much of that, but I didn't realize that your environment like that, it plays a role in suppressing a gene. I mean, do you know a little bit about that, Gene?
I think it's interesting. Unfortunately, we haven't learned too much about certain genes. It depends on it, what you're learning. I specifically have looked into it a little bit here or there.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it's fascinating. It's
no, most definitely.
They're looking to they're doing a lot of drug pharmacology on myostatin inhibitors and stuff like that.
Right. There's a peptide that I've heard of.
Yeah. I don't know how well it is on,
I haven't heard anything promising with it yet, but
it's hard. Stuff like that is very hard, especially when it gets to the gene level, because, it's very new that we're starting to realize certain enzymes could cut certain genomes or to express and de-express. That's what I'm doing in my lab right now. I'm working with these things called HDAC inhibitors. And what they do is they're enzymes that deacetylase or acetylase or methylate. And when you throw these, for example, I'll give you an example, because it's very hard to talk about unless I need examples so I can learn. So I'll give an example in terms of, let's say we have a certain protein in one dish, right? And we're just growing this protein, and it expresses the protein, whatever that protein is. Let's say it's like cell signaling. Let's say we have that protein we're growing it in media, it's growing and it's still doing the cell signaling. That means we use it as like a vehicle or like a control. Then we'll take the same exact protein, put it in another thing, but we'll treat it with an HDAC inhibitor. So we're basically inhibiting that HDAC from binding and actually working. So what that's doing is, so an HDAC is a histone deacetylase. So it'll deacetylate it, which means it'll tighten it up. It'll suppress whatever gene it is. In this case, it was a cell signaling gene. And what will happen if we throw on that HDAC inhibitor, it blocks your natural body's response to HDAX, and it'll show different expressions. So for this one that is growing and it shows, yeah, cell signaling is working just fine. You'll take the same thing, treat it with an HDAC inhibitor, and you'll notice, it's not working. There's no cell signaling. So it's kind of like the same thing in genes in your body, you know.
Right.
There's certain enzymes that happen, and for myostatin, that's a good example too. That's how myostatin works too. You know, you have a certain amount of expression, you know, and it's always a threshold. That's what I'm starting to come to find out. It's the same thing with insulin. Oh, well, I had a few gummy bears, I'm sure I spiked my insulin, versus, oh, I had a bunch of gummy bears. It's way more hyperglycemic. You get a way higher response. But there's always insulin in the body. There's always glucagon in the body. It's always like a reciprocal type thing, but it's always there. You know, it doesn't just like go away or something. So it's the same thing with genes. You know, oh, well, I guess I don't have muscle building genes. I guess I don't have myostat. It's not the case. You know, you always
have a certain amount. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So
that makes sense. Yeah, that actually, like, that puts a pretty good picture in my head. I don't know why I just see this like list of all of your genes and then just like 1 to 100 expression basically,
right.
And I just see all of that, and I can just imagine in the future we have a test that you run, and it's like, this is your gene expression for every single thing.
Right.
That's really interesting though, because then you think about I'm thinking about epigenetics now, and I'm thinking, when we alter our diet or our training, do we loosen and tighten some of those? Like, are we altering our genes? Because, like you're saying with insulin, someone who's obese, their sensitivity to that hormone is going to be much less, and it's like, you know, and then you're someone who's maybe more athletic or has a lower body mass is going to have much more sensitivity to insulin. Their body's going to react differently. So is that how that functions a little bit?
Yeah.
Like,
so epigenetics, what epigenetics is, it's still in the underlying genome, but you could change it through, for example, environment, diet, exercise. But so you have your normal genes like eye color and stuff, height. You can't change those unless you go in with certain, you know, maybe CRISPR-Cas, genome editing. But the epigenetics is what we focus in our lab too, which I find super interesting. It's the genes that you can change, you know, certain factors that influence your human body to adapt. You know, like if I'm weight training really hard, if I'm going heavy, hard, I'm eating good, my body can say, whoa, this guy's putting a lot of stress on your body. Let's adapt and help them out. And that's when your certain genes start to be expressed more or less depending on what you're doing. You know, I haven't had too many examples for this other than weightlifting, because we don't really talk about, we just talk about, for me, we're talking about protein kinase C in my lab. It's tiny protein. I've never heard of it till I got into the lab. That's the thing that's so crazy about science, is there's always little things that you never hear about or you never know about, and that are in your body that are playing important roles. So
exactly, yeah.
The amount of science we do not know is astonishing. You know, every research lab is researching, all right, what is this doing? Like, how does this affect our body? What happens if we block it?
And it could be one thing, like literally one.
And it could lead to many other things. You know,
trickle down,
yeah, it's like a trickle down.
Yeah, I'm understanding it like as you, because I my knowledge of genes. I mean, my knowledge of pharmacology, genes. I've been really focused on nutrition because that was just really what intrigued me and was really relevant. But now I'm understanding that obviously all this is also relevant, and it's just like I learned one thing and I'm like, shoot, I got to read this book and I got to read this book, and it's so very, very complex.
Yeah, it's almost like it never stops. You know, it's almost like, all right,
most definitely.
You know, I got to go on. So.
Well, and what you're saying is, like, I understand, is like, so it starts at your genes and then you have that expression and that alters like hormonal responses and
everything.
All to, if you're talking in the terms of bodybuilding, to get to this outward appearance, right? We're trying to alter maybe our physique or things like that. And it's like, it starts right here.
Yep.
So having that knowledge is so important, because I mean, at least if I would say it's so important, especially like for maybe someone like myself, where I'm just like that last 5%, you know, I'm getting to a point where muscle building is becoming a more difficult thing to do. And that 5%, that 1%, that 0.5% makes a difference. Right. When you can only put on so much more tissue on your physique. So yeah, that's really interesting. That actually, like, I appreciate that, because that really makes a lot more, it's a more digestible for me, because I had no idea. Like, I just knew genes were there and they did something.
Right.
I can barely remember my biology, the little square of gene expression, and
Oh yeah, little Punnett squares, and
that's just
this.
I did so shitty in high school. I'm so disappointed that I've missed out on all this stuff that I'm like, man, I got to go back and relearn it.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I am. It's surprising, because it's so surprising to me how much they reintroduce something. All right, we're about mitosis and meiosis again, and you're like, oh man, we always talk about that, but they just keep on adding on.
They're like, well, it's actually more complex than what you were, taught in school.
I don't know if you do Twitter at all, but they always talk about the mitochondria. They're like, oh, it's a powerhouse of the cell, but no, it's way more complex than that. There's way more to it.
More functions,
I learned it so it's.
And you know what that reminds me of? What's that movie, Lorenzo's Oil?
Lorenzo's Oil, yeah.
No, he's missing he's missing something, some gene, right? It was
what did he had did he have, what did he have? He had a disorder, right? He had a
I can't remember. I know a real life example though. One of Maddie's family friends, we were talking to him at a party, and he has a son who does not have the enzyme to break down carbohydrates.
Okay.
And you would think, oh, that's not a big deal. He'll just eat fats and proteins. And you're like, well, no, literally there's so many problems that have arose. Like, his life is so much harder because he is missing this one enzyme that his body doesn't produce.
Yep.
Like he
it by chance?
Walk, he can't, like, they have to feed him a special diet. Like, it's crazy. I can't even. And then Lorenzo's Oil, it was whatever, it was like a fat that he couldn't break down or something. I don't know.
Fats that he couldn't digest or something, which is a problem, because you have all these steps. Let's say for glycolysis, we'll use the example, carbohydrate, you use glycolysis. Let's say you eat like some rice. The first step, it needs to be turned into glucose in the liver. So you have all these steps to finally get to energy. But let's say you didn't have this enzyme to convert this to this. There's just a buildup and a buildup and a buildup.
Right.
And there's certain, and the good part about metabolism is, like for glucose, for example, glucose doesn't need to only go into glycolysis. It could go into many different pathways, pentose phosphate pathways, certain things. But once you get, there's certain steps in the pathway that's irreversible. Once it goes here, can't go back. So it needs to keep going. And then you could get a buildup of certain like compounds, and it becomes toxic to the body,
Right.
You get this buildup, you can't produce energy, but you're putting in all that food, you get a buildup of toxicity, and then
right. It's interesting that you say that, because like I'm learning a lot of these things, and I just understand them on like the base level. But like diabetes is like we're learning is not just an insulin and sugar issue. It's your body is getting flooded with too much food, and it's causing dysfunction. And it's interesting that a lot of these things that are just these disorders are buildup of things, or maybe certain tissues are becoming like unsensitive because the receptor is being just overly pounded, right? And it's just so it's very interesting that you say that, because it's like that's how I'm understanding diabetes now, is we're learning that it's just an over consumption of food, and every system in your body is becoming overwhelmed. And so now you're saying like, oh, this dysfunction here is causing these systems to get overwhelmed and causing dysfunction. So
it's a little different with diabetes, and the reason why is because insulin is such a crucial hormone. It's such a crucial hormone. A lot of people, when they talk lifting and stuff, they're like, oh, you always hear these stories. Some people die from taking insulin because they don't know what they're doing and stuff.
Right.
All insulin does is you have blood sugar. You have sugar in your blood, which transports into cells and stuff. And insulin, what it's supposed to do, it's supposed to take that blood sugar from the blood and help it enter in through the cell. So you have these certain things, and a lot of people don't understand, okay, well, what does insulin do? What is diabetes? How do you get diabetes? That, because there's two types and stuff. Once you have blood sugar and insulin, can't get it into the cell, then that's going to be a huge problem, because then your cells start to die out. They're like, oh God, we don't have nutrients that we need. There becomes a buildup of blood sugar in the blood. Certain things like that. There's type 1, type 2. I'm not too familiar. I think 1 is where the insulin, it is secreted by the pancreas, but some reason the cells can't, they can't get the insulin response. So
no, I think that's two, because one is you're born and your pancreas just doesn't produce it, right?
Right.
Yeah. Because two can be reversed, because that's a sensitivity issue, right? So it's like,
right.
if I can, usually it's body mass. If you get your body mass down, people think it's carbohydrates, but what I'm learning as far as nutrition is it's overall, you need to be in a calorie deficit, or you need to because you become insulin insensitive when your body mass is high, you get metabolic dysfunction, and your cells become less sensitive to insulin.
And that's part of that genetics, you know, your genes express a certain amount, because that's what's even expressing insulin is, you know, the gene for insulin that says, hey, express this amount of insulin and use it for certain, you know, either express a little more, a little less. So it all comes down to the central idea that it's all within our genomes, you know, which is another thing I'm starting to understand too, which I think is super cool. You know? So
I was going to ask you too. So epigenetics, the way I first heard of it was through, I thought, and this is actually from Miss Rottenborn's class.
Oh
yeah, you have her as a teacher. You had
she's a great teacher.
I vaguely remember it, but I just remember talking about a lot about it being passed down, like genetics being passed down.
Right.
I mean, is that like the first step? Like, it obviously. Well, I don't know, because epigenetic, that would be genetics then, because epigenetics is like, I don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
For genes themselves, like certain eye color, height, certain things, those genes are inherited by, you know, your parents. So once they're passed down, it goes through this crazy, you know, recombination, certain things, and then you finally get your genes. Epigenetics comes in from when you're born. So epigenetics, they're still in your underlying genome, but what it is these are things you could change through environment, through diet, through. So it starts with genes. You know, your genes are passed down, and from there, the epigenetics, the epi part means that depending on what you're doing with environment, training, your genes are going to adapt a little bit. They're going to say, okay, well, let's say I move to somewhere where it's really, really hot, you know, and I'm getting a bunch of sun exposure. My genes are going to say, oh, this guy's getting a lot of sun exposure. Let's change something.
Produce more melanin. Yeah.
Melanin. I get a little darker, and it'll help. So those are the epigenetic compounds. But like for something like, let's say, eye color, I mean, height, I guess you could change. You know, you could probably influence just a little. But certain things like body hair, eye color, ear shape, face shape, those are set in stone. Hey, they're going to be passed down. This is how they're going to, unless you introduce certain compounds. But you know,
you know, well, you know this, and I know this too. You know what I think of is, we both know Flex Wheeler, and we know his family, and all of his family has just amazing structure. You know, I remember Darius, he barely even worked out in high school, and he was just jacked. Like,
great,
do you think partially that's passed down genetics, but do you think like what Flex did altered the genome to where now it is passed down to Darius, that it you know, he has this structure now, and he has this ability to build muscle and retain muscle, you know what I mean?
That it definitely it does increase the factor, especially when you introduce certain things. Let's say for testosterone, when you let's say I'm taking testosterone, that's going to influence my genome partially because it's increasing a hormone, it's increasing the protein concentrations, and what's going to happen is my genomes are going to adapt to that. So you know, I'm not too certain, but I would say it probably plays a pretty good role in terms of genes and stuff, because our epigenetics is going to affect our children's genetics. You know, let's say
that makes sense.
You know what I'm saying? Our muscle structure.
That's kind of what I was trying to connect, but I didn't really know.
Yeah, I finally got it, and I'm like, okay, I think this is what. So that's the good part, is when we change our epigenetics, when we become, you know, let's say I move, for example, my pigmentation gets darker, those genes are going to be passed down, and then they're going to start with that, and then they're going to be able to change their building blocks. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So, do you think hormones are maybe a more powerful, like exogenous hormones are more powerful, play a more powerful role in that? Like, if I take testosterone, is that's going to affect my genome maybe be more impactful than like if I do a dietary intervention or
right. Yeah, it for sure would. It would affect two different things. Dietary intervention, you know, it does affect epigenetics because part of it is diet. But when it comes to hormones and stuff, remember, our body has those certain genes, and they say, all right, well, let's produce hormones here from your pituitary, all this stuff. Let's produce a certain amount. But, you know, when you're taking, let's say we're taking tests or something, it influences our genome to change, because it's not just one gene that's changing. You know, it's not like we're injecting testosterone and our body's saying, all right, well, let's turn off the genome for testosterone. He has some. It's going to influence carbohydrate metabolism, fatty acid metabolism,
right?
All these certain things across the board, and it all starts in your genome. So by doing that, you're changing a lot of different other genes that are influenced by testosterone, you know, because they're almost all interconnected. Everything's almost all interconnected. That's what makes
most definitely
so complicated. Is like, well, if I just change this one thing, why is all these things changing, you know? So I think I'm not 100% sure, but I would make the conclusion that it should probably some sort of influence on muscle bellies, hormones.
Right. I know because when people talk about muscle memory and things like that, you know, the amount of satellite cells that you've created from training and from testosterone use growth hormone is something people talk about a lot, where you create more satellite cells and then eventually those satellite cells grow. And once you create a cell, that doesn't go away. It's like same with what I've learned about like fat tissue is when you're in a calorically restricted state, sometimes your body creates new fat cells, but they're really, really tiny. So you can become overly fat after that because your body's setting up for rebound. It's setting up for, oh, we're in famine right now. We're going to need food later. So, but those cells never go away no matter how many times you diet.
Right.
So and same with muscle cells, no matter how many, like if you take a couple of years off, a great example is Seth Ferosi. If you saw him take time off, he was like, oh, this is a 6-month transformation. And sure, he probably got back on hormones and a diet and everything, but just like that, all his muscles back. And you're just like, what the heck? And it's because those cells, all they do is they just atrophy, but they're still there.
Yep.
So like that muscle fullness that, like, you know, you only see top level bodybuilders have, he just has it back already. And you're like, what the heck? Like, I've been doing this for 10 years.
I think with like Kevin Lebroni, when he came back into the, you know, he started, I said, ooh, how's that going to look? You know? And then he came out, I'm like, whew.
Except for the injury that inhibited his like legs to be able to grow. I mean, his upper body was pretty much almost matched to what he had. I mean, if you gave him a couple of years, he probably would have been back to where he was, to be honest.
Oh yeah,
that's interesting.
It's the same thing with like, for example, I'll just, you know, throw it in there, is immunology. You also have memory cells. You know, when you first get sick, you know, your B cells, T cells, all these, you know, macrophages, neutrophils, they all attack this thing and they make memory cells. So like for the common cold, you know, you first get the common cold, it'll probably hit pretty hard. But after you get it over and over, your immune system recognizes, oh, it's just a cold, and they'll bind to it and just absolutely destroy it. You know, so it's like the same thing with flu. That's like what a vaccine is. You know, you're giving yourself a very weak amount of virus so your body could destroy it,
recognize it, destroy it. Yeah.
You know, so it's really cool. I mean, a lot of science just almost goes hand in hand. You know, a lot of little things that, for example, vitamins. You know, whoever would have thought vitamins play a huge, crucial role in like just physiology in general, you know?
Yeah, dude. Oh, I have the most long-winded, and I'm going to keep it short, but on nutrition and muscle building and actual micronutrition, because I worked with a coach for a good period of time, and this is the best knowledge I had at the time. So I was like, okay, this is the way to go. And we're just you notice the focus on, like with old school bodybuilding coaches, is like macros. It's just protein, carbs, and fat, right? And a lot of the time it's like restricting fat too. But so I started working with you know, I started doing the vertical diet, and I think it's so genius, because what he did was he's like, okay, let's take this bodybuilding diet and let's add in micronutrition. Because what I noticed was I started to get dysfunction, especially in a calorie deficit when we were restricting food. My micronutrition was terrible. So your thyroid goes out the door, your natural well, obviously I didn't have natural testosterone, but for natural athletes, their natural testosterone goes out the door. You start to get lethargic, you start to get, and not to mention, when you are taking exogenous hormones like myself and you have a micronutrient deficiency, it just exacerbates the side effects of the hormone. So like if you take, say, like a Winstrol or a Trenbolone, and Trenbolone will cause you to feel lethargic. If you're micronutrient deficient, that's tenfold. Your T3 is going to be impacted so much more. So yeah, I think I've learned that the focus of that diet is micronutrition, and
Yeah.
I feel so much better. I've been able to put on much more muscle mass. It's like you have this hierarchy in your body, and it's like if nutrition isn't taken care of, and your basic functions can't occur in your body, then you're not going to build muscle.
Yeah. The rest
I,
doesn't matter, at that point. That's a
exactly.
lot big misconception too. A lot of people are like, oh, well, what's your macros? Where are your macros at? But you never hear anything about micronutrients or
Right, right. Yeah,
multiple.
well, there's a study that they had people consume the equivalent calories from eggs and egg whites,
Mm.
and the people who ate eggs, equivalent calories, gained more strength and had
Oh
better
yeah.
body composition.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, so now obviously it's not just protein that's causing; it's probably the choline and the biotin and all the other
Yep.
nutrients in the yolk that have something to do with muscle or strength gain too.
Yep.
So yeah, it's very short-sighted. I mean, it's really difficult to get people to focus on that. Like obviously I think if you were to sit someone down and say like what should I focus on if I'm like just starting, it's like just eating whole foods because
Yeah.
in different
Because
colors. If you can identify a different color, that's different nutrition in that food too. So
right. Right. I think it is a hierarchy too. When you think about it, when you start out, you always talk about macros because hopefully you're already getting micronutrients within the macros and stuff like that.
right, right,
But a lot of the times people don't realize, well, if you are missing certain micronutrients, your body isn't going to function at optimal condition. And it's probably, it's going to be more detrimental to you than it is helpful. You
right.
know, vitamin deficiencies we learned in nutrition when I was taking some of my nutrition classes, they play a way bigger role than I thought, because you never really, take your, you don't hear that. Oh, did you eat your grains? You don't hear,
Right.
did you get vitamin A? Did you get your you never
Yeah.
hear that. So.
It's funny because Stan will talk about that. He's like, all right, well, we're drinking cranberry juice to get your iodine.
Yeah.
And it's like there's a reason behind it. It was really cool because I worked with them for a year, and he would like be like, okay, do this now, and then he would send me a link to an article, and it's like, oh, this thing functions this way, and it does all like iodine has this compounding effects in the body. Like each vitamin just does like 10 different things in the body, and you're like,
Yeah.
so if I'm deficient in that one thing, all these things can't happen at the
Yep.
best. Yeah.
So it's crazy how much there is to it. There really is a lot to it. But hopefully the whole understanding too is that you get most of it through the big ones, and that it'll all kind of trickle down.
Yeah, yeah.
But sometimes it doesn't work that way,
Right.
unfortunately.
Well, the minutia becomes more important. Like, say, maybe someone like myself who's trying to get that like last bit of gains. It's like
Right.
that
Right.
is
Which
important.
is
You gotta.
more important. Yeah, that part is so important, especially trying to lose that little bit more fat or this that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I think I'm at in my kind of career, so
Yeah.
to speak, is
Yeah.
that I'm just trying to like get these like now it's like, okay, I've gotten all the big things pretty much not figured out because like you said, it's always evolving and being
Mhm.
more evidence based. It's like I'm not attached to anything. Everything's always changing, but
Right. Right.
as I'm getting the gains are coming on, not as much. It's I have to do these little things.
Right.
Um,
Right.
I wanted to get in some questions. That was like really informative. I would love to talk more about it and maybe more nuanced things in the future. How much time do you have?
Um,
To be?
11. Yeah, I got a good amount of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We got a good amount of questions. We might be able to get through some. One question I had for you from myself is, are you ever going to compete?
God, what a good question. I don't know. I gave that a lot of thought. At first I was really thinking I wanted to just to see, all right, well, how good could I look, if I really dedicated. But I think in the future I would definitely look into it because I think
Yeah.
right now the hardest part is just with all the school and nutrition. And the more I find out, the more I find out how important nutrition timing is. Certain things, there's sometimes where I'm in lab for like 8 hours a day. So I'm not at like optimal condition. Certain
Right,
things.
right.
I'll
No,
burn
no, I wouldn't say probably during school is the smartest time to do it. I've
keep
realized, I mean, obviously I'm trying to be the best I can, and I
right.
realized that I have to have less going on if I want to even be, and that's kind of partially the reason why I haven't competed is like there's something like in my life currently will get in the way, like I'm working too much or I'm not being able to study as much as I'd like,
Mhm.
and that will if that pulls on me too much, I know that I'm not going to step on stage because I can't bring the best I can because I have all these
Right.
other things pulling at me. So I mean
Right.
that would make sense. I think I got you in that situation. I think we would be really great at collaborating because of your understanding and my understanding. So
yeah,
when you're ready to do that,
it's the amount of knowledge you have is amazing. You know, like you could take some of these classes and you'd fly. For example, metabolic regulation. When I first took metabolic regulation, I had a lot of people always talked, oh, well, that's like one of the hardest biochemistry classes. Oh, that one's going to be very hard. But from what, you know, you and I have been talking about nutrition for years now, you know, you enter it and it's almost like you're learning what we've been learning for the past so many years, you know? So there's certain things that you do, you know, if you self-learn it, like science is science everywhere, you know?
Right.
It doesn't matter where you get it from, as long as you get the right information, you know? So
yeah, that's something I'm trying. Oh, I appreciate that. I mean, that's something I'm trying to do. It's really difficult. A lot of my, you know, now I'm really getting into like the textbooks and really trying to expand on that, because like I was telling you, I just have this like very broad understanding of how everything works. Now I'm trying to get into like the nitty gritty, like what is actually occurring in the body and the mechanisms. And it's like the problem with not going to school, because I definitely had some like, and on the school just didn't work for me as a person. The problem with not going to school is like, you know, prereqs and stuff like that. Like, I'm reading this book right now and it's like I'm Googling half the terms. Like I'm learning them for sure, but it's like, you know, frick, what was one of them that I learned yesterday? I don't know. It was something about like gene coding and like the actual terminology around it. And it's like, he just says it as like, oh, that's just what happens. And I'm like, well, what the hell is that? You know?
Right. Well,
so
wait till you get into the craziest part is when you get to like talking about enzymes. There's certain enzymes that are unbelievable. Like one is phosphofructokinase, you know? So you're getting all these huge names and you're like, what the hell is going on?
Well, I've experienced that with hormones where they have like the methylated, you know, or even pro hormones. I remember I bought a pro hormone and I used it for one of my contest preps, and like the name was literally like this long and like that tiny of print.
It's got the numbers.
Dimethyl
3/4 hydrocot.
Because what they did with pro hormones is they just kept altering the sequence.
Yep. All you got to do
that they could, so it was legal, because it's like the old one was if you had an A at the end, it's illegal, but you put a B at the end or whatever,
and it'll be just fine.
And exactly.
Now that's all organic chemistry, organic chemistry is insane, because you can change one little structure on a molecule. If you just do one of these, you have a whole different compound.
Right. Well, I want to do we need to do a whole podcast on organic chemistry, because I have my girlfriend's textbook and I'm learning more about anabolics, and I just really want to get into that, because I mean, that's some area that I really lacked in. And it's like, you take a testosterone, you alter it, and you have this other compound that does these things, that aromatizes or it doesn't, or, you know, and that's just.
Well, I don't know if you've seen, but if you look at the chemical structure of testosterone and then you compare it to estrogen, there's
like missing one thing.
Missing one chemical bond, which is what aromatization, you know, when it aromatizes, all you're doing is cleaving that bond.
Yeah. You know what? There's actually a question in here that we need to talk about now that you say that. Is nandrolone only a possible HRT alternative? That's asked by Jordan Matthews.
Nandrolone. So nandrolone is DECA, right? DECA. That's
19. It's a 19 nor, I believe.
19 nor. Yeah. So that's the tricky part about this is it's very hard. You know, that there's certain things I want to ask in class that I just can't. But for something like nandrolone, I mean, most steroids, most common anabolics are derivatives of testosterone. To maybe cut down aromatization, to cut down, you know, dihydrotestosterone, certain things to, you know, switch. So I think if you wanted to do, you know, HRT, straight hormone replacement therapy, the best way to go is just testosterone, because the testosterone, people don't understand testosterone. When you're injecting testosterone, your body knows exactly what to do with it. You know, it's not a new compound. It's not like meth or something fucking crazy where you take it and, you know, your body's.
I hate when I inject meth and it just doesn't work the way I want it to.
You inject meth and you're like, oh my God, like this, what's going on? No, with testosterone, the beauty of testosterone, you inject it, your body says, oh, it's just testosterone. Let's take it. Let's transport it. So, I think if you're going for like, maybe if you wanted to cruise, for example, if you want to just cruise and stuff, then yeah, you could take nandrolone, but I would always do any compound with test. I would always run it with test, in my opinion, just to There's certain compound. I'm pretty sure nandrolone is one too, that nandrolone will suppress you pretty well, and then
so they actually use nandrolone in some contraceptives.
Oh yeah.
Because it's you know it'll stop.
I think it's one of the most suppressive ones too.
One of the guys on YouTube, Derek with More Plates More Dates, did a whole video on it, and he was like looking at his, I don't know if his girlfriend's birth control, and it was 19 nor testosterone was what she was taking.
Yeah. Which is crazy, because birth control is the same thing damn near as
and it's legal and heavily prescribed. And I remember, dude, oh my god, I remember in high school the Planned Parenthood came in.
Yeah.
And
that was
I was
for
sitting
psychology, no?
For psychology.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, and this lady's explaining birth control. And it kind of clicked for me is when she's explaining. I'm like, at this time I was already taking testosterone, so I mean, full disclosure. And she's explaining estrogen, and I'm like, that sounds a lot like testosterone, like the way it functions, a lot of the things that it does, not exactly, but just like the basic mechanisms. And I raised my hand, and I was like, excuse me, isn't estrogen a steroid because of the way it functions? And she's like, no, it's not a steroid, and it's completely safe. And I'm like, okay. And I'm just like, I was like, I didn't think and I remember the class laughing because they're like, oh, this big muscle head dude is asking this question. Yeah. But I was like, man, I don't think, I mean, it may be because of the dose response, there's less side effects, but it's such a small amount, but
it damn near does the same thing. It's regulating certain functions, and it's a artificial dose.
It's an exogenous hormone, right?
It is.
And so exactly. And it has some similar functions, but I just remember
of steroids. Steroids are terrible. Steroids are so bad. They're like, what is it?
Well, we got to think about what was the original function of steroids was to be used for medicine. I don't think. I mean, some of the derivatives were developed for sports performance, but
sports, some animals, but regardless, is people don't understand. Yeah, testosterone is medical. You use it for medicine. A lot of other steroids are actually used for. I'm pretty sure I want to say DECA for bone mineral density and stuff like that. They do. I don't know if they prescribe, and if they do, I'm sure they prescribe very, very low doses.
But they do, they do for joint problems. And to get back, I kind of went off a tangent there, but to get back on your question, I completely agree with you. So testosterone's the best because of the aromatization, because you get some estrogen with it, and there's a balance.
Correct.
When I was looking at a couple of videos of people who ran DECA only for HRT. One of these guys, the More Plates More Dates guy, he did a video with his blood work on 100 milligrams of NPP a week, but he also took exogenous epidermal steroidal gel. So he rubbed steroidal on his skin.
Yeah.
And because there's no aromatization of DECA, he was saying that upwards of a gram, the androgenic to estrogenic, the ratio is so skewed that you get a lot of poor side effects like low HDL and the what is it, like it's cell protection and things like that.
Because your cells they're covered by a lipid layer. Your membrane has a lipid layer. That's how things are put in and out. You can't just shove anything you want in the cell. That's what insulin does. The insulin kind of opens it up and says, hey, you got some sugar for it,
Yeah.
So
he was saying that, and so he was saying he took exogenous estrogen, and even with exogenous estrogen, his estrogen wasn't high enough.
Yeah.
So even upwards of a gram. I know Jordan Peters, I don't know if you know who that is, like probably one of the strongest bodybuilders around right now.
Yeah, I've heard.
I've joined his forum for a little bit, and he was saying he was taking 2.1 grams of just nandrolone because he doesn't like the way testosterone affects him.
Yeah.
I don't agree. That's not a good. I mean, I never take nearly as much, but obviously he's much bigger than I am. So but I would be curious to see what his estrogen levels are. Maybe at 2.1 grams, maybe you'll see enough estrogen to where you'll function correctly, but you got to really look at health. And if a lot of people who are on HRT is just for health purposes. So I wouldn't be messing with your estrogen, because then you have poor HDL, your risk of cardiovascular events, things like that go up. So you can't beat testosterone. Like you said, it's the end all be all. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But it may have some purpose. It may have some uses. I've seen personally, I know one of my friend's dads was doing HRT, and he did 100 milligrams of test and then 100 milligrams of DECA for a short period of time for his joints. And I think that might work okay. I would still probably think your estrogen might get a little skewed. But I think always have a base dosage of testosterone is like the best. And I've heard of people using orals in combination with a DECA, but obviously when you're doing HRT, you don't want orals, but because they'll cause aromatization more, like D-bol or something like that.
Right, especially D-bol. Yeah, D-bol's crazy.
Nikki Pisty Ping, this guy I work with. I don't know what your username means at all, bro. You gotta explain that. And he asked a couple questions. What's your opinion on CrossFit?
I mean, I'm not too familiar with CrossFit. I had a lot of guys in SAE and stuff. They did CrossFit. I mean, it's a different type of training. I think it targets different different twitch muscles. I'm pretty sure, because it's high intensity. I want to say, right? It's high intensity, a lot of repetitions.
Yeah.
Kind of. It almost looks like HIIT training, damn near. You know, you're always
it's circuit style. You're going from one to the next to the next.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if you're talking about like, if you efficiently want to grow muscle, it's not the best way. There's a lot of factors that go into that, recovery capabilities and rest periods and things like that.
Right.
I would say I used to hate on it a lot more because there is definitely like this cult culture that comes along with it, but there is a right way to do it. And at the end of the day, the best exercise is the exercise that you enjoy doing. So that's something you've got to really keep in mind. If you hate just straight up doing squats and you'd rather do like a circuit style training, get it over with in 45 minutes, then that's a great way to look at it. But just don't fall into the stigma of like, what happens is people are like trying to lift the weight as fast as they can and they throw form out the window, and that's how you get injured. It's exactly how you get injured. So, you know, make sure your execution is great. I think if you practice your execution really rigidly, and then you go to try to do a lift maybe with more speed, if you have it rigid and you aren't just trying to get the weight up, and you actually, you know, have learned this proper motor pattern, then it may transfer over when you try to incorporate speed. But don't ever be like, oh, I'm going to get this last rep, and you just do, you know, one of these to push something over your head, and you're just like lopsided, and that's something to be important to watch for. But honestly, I have nothing against, you know, any form of exercise, as long as, I mean, I kind of don't like cardio. I kind of have something against that, but a lot of the research coming out doesn't support that. So, but it's great. I would, as long as you're getting out and working out, it's a good thing.
Yeah, I hear it's really good for functionality too. So I mean, it's a different type of training, but I mean, a lot of people don't even understand too. It almost, if you're lifting weight or if you're putting stress on your muscles, you're going to break down the muscle. So the most important part, I would say, is really the nutrition behind it.
Oh, 100%. I think that's always the most important part. I think because you can see like so much physical and health change from nutrition.
Oh, yeah.
And that's something that's underplayed. I mean, you can train yourself into the ground and not grow at all if you don't focus on that. I mean, it's part of the puzzle, but I would say that's why it's been my focus, is because I've seen the most physical change from nutrition, you know, not from drugs, not from training, but actual like focusing on nutrition.
Yeah, I agree.
Have you heard about, so he's asking about Greg Doucette versus Athlean X. Have you heard about that controversy that's going on right now?
No, I haven't. I used to watch Athlean X, but
actually Stan linked me a couple of his videos, and I was like, why are you sending me this guy? But he has some good information. So apparently Athlean X was like, he was accused of using fake weights in one of his videos. I
didn't click on it, but I scrolled by it on YouTube, and I was like,
I don't even watch these videos anymore. Like, to be honest with you, like, there's just so much. Like, have you seen any of Greg Doucette's videos?
I haven't.
Oh, well, now that we're talking about him, we're probably going to be in one of his videos, because what he does is he pulls and just creates controversy with a lot of his videos. It's all bro science, though, and that's what I was saying about, you know, really leading people in the right direction. To be honest, as far as the controversy goes, I just really don't concern myself with much of that stuff. I barely turn on my TV. If I go on YouTube, I have certain channels that I look at. Like, I don't like what every once in a while I watch like Nick Strength and Power and like watch what's going on. And sometimes I'll engage in that for a minute, but I don't know, man. I use YouTube, I use Instagram as platforms that provide value, and if maybe entertainment, but like if they're not really doing much for me, I kind of just get off of them. And I really think that a lot of that a lot of Greg's platform is like clout chasing, you know, using relevant topics, and I don't know, I just don't engage in that a whole lot. As far as Athlean X potentially using fake weights, I think that's shitty. I think people do what they want to do to be able to create, you know, clout again and get attention, but it definitely misleads a lot of people. And if he's denying taking drugs, and he has taken drugs, that's also shitty. But you know, I've had that problem with Michael Hearn for so many years. People like idolize that guy, and it's like, blatantly like tries to make a statement that he doesn't take drugs when he obviously does, and it's just like that frustrates me. The one thing is like honesty and integrity to me are just they're above all. Like if you throw those things out the window, then you deserve your brand to be crushed. And if you're building a brand based on that, and or trying to sacrifice your integrity to get more views, you get what's coming to you basically. So but basically their whole controversy, man, it's just bullshit. I try not to get tied up in that stuff, man. It's some of the least relevant stuff in your life. If
like it happens
really,
a lot too. I don't know if you watch Kenny Ko, but Kenny Ko, like
he was exposing a lot of those guys, Brad Castleberry. And they hold so strong. I mean, they're just like, oh, I've never used fake weights, and you're like, you've been caught multiple times. It's just like, I don't. And same with Michael Hearn. It's like, dude, it's just let it go. But I try not to concern myself with that stuff too much. Just what if it really isn't? It may entertain you, but it's like it doesn't really do much other than that.
Right.
So I'd much rather watch someone educating me than entertaining me, I guess.
Cool entertainment. Yeah.
Yeah. What have you learned about yourself in quarantine?
I would say personally for me, it's been just more kind of more on what I want to do, because I've been so, I guess in quarantine, I've also been living in a fraternity house, so it's kind of different.
Yeah.
But don't get me wrong, it's been a lot more time on my hands, so I could actually go in and see, all right, well, what else do I need to advance on? So a lot of it's been nutrition. Also, a lot of it just been, just certain issues, I guess. I don't know. A lot of quarantine has been, self-isolation, certain things. So you really start to find out, all right, what do I want to do now? I'm by myself.
Right.
What's my passion? What's going to keep me, I guess, engaged in what I'm doing, And for me, it's kind of learning, because there's nothing better, in my opinion, than learning, and especially when it comes
to I agree 100%.
Certain things. Like a lot of what I did was I watched a bunch of YouTube videos, I guess, on like, Athlean X, a lot of the fasted cardio, fasted training. And I studies on them. All right, well, is there any studies that actually prove? Because a lot of bro science is actually totally incorrect and totally different from what real science, what actually is happening.
Yeah.
Which I figured out with fasted lifting and stuff. Fasted
lifting.
Yeah,
I had my last bodybuilding coach, fasted cardio, injecting L-carnitine into your trained muscle. Fucking, there's so many things. I just like I look it up and I'm like, you just told me to do this, and there's no evidence anywhere to support any of this.
Right.
It's just what's been done for years, because they're conceptually, oh, that makes
yeah, exactly. That's another huge misconception, because especially when you look good, you're big and you look good, and you, let's say you have a trainer, let's say you have a coach like your old coach saying, oh, we'll do this, and why would you not take the but when you find out that, okay, well, the science doesn't show anything that is like conclusive that says fasted cardio, fasted training does work, you're more,
you know what the response would be is, well, it just fucking does. And it's like, okay,
exactly. So
question everything. Absolutely. No, I agree with you on that, man. I was in prep at the time that this started. And anybody who's been in a really, like, not just like a diet, like a really calorically restricted state, especially with hormones like, trenbolone, which I was taking, your mental state is very altered. And I get in this bubble where I don't want people around me. I don't want to be touched. Like, I just kind of like get more and more isolated. Like I'm already isolated, but I am like mentally isolated as well. So like I'm not seeing people, I'm not interacting with people. And now I'm like in my own bubble. Like I don't want to talk to people. I put in my headphones. But the good thing that came out of that is I doubled down on, like you said, education. Like I've really learned, and I learned from this situation, that a lot of my lack of confidence comes from my lack of knowledge. The more knowledge that I have, the more confidence I have, especially trying to provide information to people. One of my biggest fears is not providing the best information to people when I do a post or something. And I feel much more confident with myself. It's like, when I have the knowledge, when I have, like, it's just, when I learn, I feel better. It's really weird how to explain it, but I never knew that until I did.
Your posts are really good when it comes down to, what it's saying, the science behind it. It's all there, which is beautiful, which is great, because a lot of posts, they don't really include that,
Yeah, I try to, man, but it's just I doubled down on it. Before this, I couldn't even sit down and read a book. Like I've been a lot of audio visual learning, which has been great for me. That's definitely my strong suit. But I've been able to sit down and read, and once I started doing it, I'm like, oh shit, what was I missing out on before? Because
Yeah.
before I was really bodybuilding focused, like that's all I did.
Mhm.
And yeah, man, I doubled down on that. I also learned a lot about like my intention with competing and stuff. It was actually really good that my competition got cut short because I was doing posing, and I was like, I'm sure a lot of the factors of not having a gym available, the stress of the situation, all that influenced my physique. But I was looking at myself and I'm like, I'm still not ready, man. My goal has always been step on stage with a pro level physique and get my pro card. And I've had a lot of coaches before tell me, no, you need to work your way up, blah, blah, blah. I'm 100% for the experience. I agree with that. But um, I don't, the idea of competing as an amateur isn't super attractive to me because obviously there's no monetary reward, and not like I do it for the money, but and
Right.
I just kept asking myself why. I finally really sat down with myself and asked, like, why am I doing this? What am I trying to get out of this? And I remember I was training, and I would be like, why am I doing this? And I'd be like, I don't fucking know. It's like
Yep.
the shows aren't even for sure right now. I don't look the way I want to look. There's so many factors there. So yeah, I really, everything got outlined. I mean, the fucking reason we're doing this podcast right now, I've been wanting to do this for so long, and I'm like, man, I just need to do it. Like it's been really difficult for me to build the confidence to do it. And I was like, no, fuck this. I mean, I could literally lose my job tomorrow because of an unforeseeable event.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm trying to make money off this either, but the providing value, learning, getting more knowledge, becoming a better bodybuilder, all that stuff, like really came to fruition from this whole event. So a lot of positive came out of it, I think, personally.
Mhm.
Also financial, like I've just been getting smarter with money because of the whole situation,
Oh
and
yeah.
how
I've been
quickly you
blowing
lose
it.
your job.
I've been blowing my money.
Are you getting unemployment? Were you working at all?
No, I wasn't.
Oh,
So in lab, since it's kind of iffy, but since I'm back in lab, I think we're gonna get more funding, so I'll be getting paid from there. So
oh, that's awesome. I didn't
yeah, I
even know
didn't
you
get
got paid
paid
for that.
last. So I didn't last year because I had to be in it to do my senior thesis.
Yeah,
So after I got done with my
that's
senior
awesome.
thesis, now for master's school, they have to give me funding for my project. So
Hell
you
yeah.
know, here we go.
There
You
you
know,
go. Get paid with doing what you love.
yeah, can't get
Um,
better.
best mass building exercise for muscle group. Best for each muscle group.
I'll let you take a stab at that first.
Yeah.
I would say
Yeah.
I mean, I would assume best mass building. I don't know. You might know more about it, but I guess yeah. Let's see. What do you think?
Yeah. My training knowledge is getting there. I would say probably. So the way I look at exercises is also a hierarchy, and I always choose exercises like as my different viewpoint from learning about like science of training is that we're not trying to just cram as much crap into a training session as possible. It's
Right.
like what is the most effective thing you can do with your time. I was doing John Meadows programs before, and those programs were like 2.5 hour workouts, right?
Yeah.
And it's just I feel like at one point I just like would get burnt out and I wasn't enjoying the workouts. I wasn't getting a pump anymore. So what is if I want to get my workout down to an hour and a half, the most effective possible, what can I fit in that hour and a half? So that's what we want to first look at exercises, right? So I would say looking at basic compound lifts, for chest, I sometimes a bench press, usually like a dumbbell press where you have more unilateral function. Squat, if you can get full depth, a bent over barbell row. The other little nuances that are going to come in there are how is your execution? Like if you have limited ankle mobility, like myself, maybe a squat isn't the best place to start. Like I have a squat wedge now, so I can get like my knees, my ass to literally my ankles now, and that's where I'd like to see a squat. So what actually Flex and Stan had me do is they took out all the squatting from my program when I first worked with them, and we did leg press and hack squat.
Oh
And
yeah.
I eventually during this quarantine I could only squat, and I took all that form that I learned from those lifts and I applied it back to squatting, and my depth on my squat was so much better because I was my leverage in those lifts was much better, and I could get my depth better.
Mhm.
But so that's another thing to look at is can you get full range with your physiology on a certain lift? What fits with your body? If you can't bench press all the way down, then maybe it's smart to go to a dumbbell press and try to get that full range because having a full range of motion is probably the most effective. But first, look at compound lifts. Most bang for your buck. What can I get the most efficient and the least amount of time? You're going to get the most muscle recruitment out of that. Then look at your range on the lift. Does it work with your body? And then, I mean, I would always obviously try to pick things too based on if you enjoy doing that exercise. If you fucking hate squats, don't do squats. Simple as that. Your compliance is going to taper off after a while if you don't like doing squats or a certain age.
I was for sure going to say, ever since I was training, I always liked doing compounds first, you know, compounds. A lot of people don't, I guess, like when you do isolation movements, you're really just working, you know, I guess in terms of like the curl, like certain variations of the curl, it's kind of like a show like at that point. But as long as, for me, the compounds are always very crucial, very necessary. Mind to muscle connection, because a lot of people, you know, you could go through the motion. I used to train with people, and they would just kind of just swing the weight, just do the motion and stuff, and you know, basically have no pump at all. And
that's another really important thing, is if you connect with the movement. There's some movements that you'll do, like even myself, I've developed an amazing connection with my back over the last couple of years, but there's still some movements that I do, and I just don't feel it. And it's like, so when I was doing programming and I would pick an exercise, you know, I would pick it for a mesocycle, so it'd be like 10 weeks sometimes. And if I did it one week and I'm like, I'm not feeling this, I would just immediately get up and do something else. It's like, it's just a waste of my time.
Yeah.
You know? So I agree with that 100%. It's definitely often overlooked.
Yeah. I would first do back when I was starting out. I would always do back, and I'd be like, God, my biceps have a great pump, you know? And it's like, okay, well then that means something's not right, you know? And a lot of people always say, oh, I feel it more in my bicep, or, you know what I'm saying? So like the mind to muscle connection, I think is crucial, is huge.
Yeah. Well, I think we think of it as like this mind muscle connection is total bro science term, but it really does go down to a neurological level, as if that pathway is firing correctly, if you have a good connection with that muscle. Like if you've fired a pathway enough times, like I'm sure if you do a lift enough times, your body will learn that, and you'll have a better actual mental connection with it. Because there is like an actual neurological connection you develop, like the ability to, like, you know, flex your chest on command. That's literally because I've contracted my chest so many times that the pathway is so strong. It's the same with education. It's like you read something 30 times, that pathway to that memory, that actual piece of information is really strongly connected in your brain. So definitely, it's not all bro science, and I think that's a really important thing that people overlook a lot of the time.
Yeah, I agree.
Young neck pillow, which is Jordan. I don't even know what that one means. Probably some inside joke. Would you rather have to take DMP twice a year or train natty for life?
Yeah, I would probably train natty for life on that one. All I know about DMP is what I've heard from, you know, like you and certain things, but I don't know, you know, DMP
I don't know much about it
from what I've heard, you know.
Yeah, no, I mean, as far as like my hierarchy, I've definitely put health up there. So I would say probably train natty. I think my love for training and bodybuilding definitely doesn't surpass my you know, I don't know. I guess they go hand in hand, really. I wouldn't want to just sacrifice all my health to be able to bodybuild. That being said, sometimes I think it's a dose dependent thing. So I think we look at this and it's like, oh, it's this drug that's been used in rat poison. I'm never going to use the drug again. I've used it one time. I don't know if you know that. I used it one time and I really didn't notice much on it. It was kind of just whatever. Because just a friend had it and he gave it to me, and I was like a fucking walking experiment. So I just took it. Yeah, but I didn't really notice anything that was like just like blowing away, like I'm just melting off fat. It just made me feel like shit, really. I would say dose dependent. There may be some promising at low doses, but it hasn't been researched enough for me to ever feel comfortable taking it. And I would probably just stay completely away from it. I mean, you can get so much out of diet and training alone. But so yeah, I would probably still train natty though, especially just with the low amount of research done on that, because I don't know how much twice a year would affect your health. I would assume probably would at the doses that are being used. So yeah, all natural there.
Always like a risk reward, you know. So
exactly. That's the way I look at my hormone use. Like if I can't take certain hormones, I can't even touch orals anymore, just because I can't get out of bed, I can't train, I can't eat. It's like, okay, well then that's a fucking waste of time. There's some people who would put that first and be like, I'm just going to take the hardest drugs and grow the most. And it's like, well, all these other things are going out the window. See, exactly, risk reward is like the way to look at it. And you can still people have this total skewed idea of what you can get training naturally. Like, I mean, I don't think there's very few people that have really actually tried to dive into their nutrition and their training to even be thinking about touching enhancements that, people don't understand that there's a lot you can do without the use of enhancements. And especially if you're not a competitor or you're not trying to further yourself or your education or provide value to other people, then I don't think it's a good option really.
Right.
Because there's a lot of side effects that come along with it too. Like I hate the way I feel on drugs. Like it's just, I don't feel good. So I prefer being on HRT. That's like the best I ever feel.
Yeah.
Who would have had, and are you okay with staying on till noon?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Would you rather, or who had a greater Olympia potential, Luke Sando or Dallas McCarver?
I'm not too familiar with Luke. I would say I liked how Dallas McCarver looked a lot.
Really? I would say the opposite of that.
I haven't seen the other guy. But I don't know. Yeah, see if you could screen.
Luke, you heard of what happened to Luke, right? You heard all that stuff?
No.
Oh yeah, Luke Sando committed suicide.
Oh, he did.
Yeah, I posted about it.
Oh, dude, you know what? I remember seeing your post. That was
yeah. You should go through and watch some of his podcasts with Fuad.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
he was on their podcast. Honestly, he's such a great person, and that's kind of where I really kind of started to follow him and stuff. But he's a phenomenal bodybuilder. Here, I'll show you him right now.
Yeah.
Rest in peace to both of them, man. It's sad. So yeah, we're thinking that they're thinking that it may be quarantine related because he was already kind of in a depressed state.
Yeah,
so that's really upsetting. I mean, I think that affects a lot of people negatively.
I think it does. It really does.
How do I screen share on this thing? I figured it out the other day.
The bottom.
Screen share there. Yeah, I see it.
Yeah, there you go.
I got it. All right. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Here.
Oh yeah. Oh wow, he looks really good.
Yeah, dude. Here's him next to Cedric. He got third at the Arnold. Oh shit! He got third at the Arnold. He's like oh look, there's a comparison of the two.
Oh no way.
It's really grainy, but I think Luke had more potential from what we saw from him. Dallas probably did, but we didn't really get to see him. I think we saw Luke at his actual best before he passed away. I don't think we ever got to really, I mean, not his best, but like pretty close. I don't think we got to see Dallas close to his best. So it's really hard to say. But man, he looked phenomenal at the last Arnold, like pretty tight waist for how big he was, like as much mass as he was carrying. Here's him in the vacuum.
Oh yeah.
He's one of Chris Aceto's guys, but yeah, man, phenomenal. So I would put my money on Luke, to be honest. All right, how do I
seen him now. Yeah, he looks really good.
Yeah,
really good.
Okay, full screen. Okay, a couple more questions here. Opinion on peptides for nagging injuries, TB 500, BPC, etc. Have you ever used any of those?
I haven't used peptides at all, but there's misconceptions with so peptides are just like peptides form into proteins and stuff like that.
Yeah, they're amino acid sequences, correct?
Right, correct. Yeah, and there's literally thousands of proteins in your body that are doing functions. All the DNA goes to RNA, it goes to proteins. So
yep.
It depends on what those peptides do. I'm sure that there are a bunch of peptides that actually could help with injuries and stuff like that. I'm not too familiar with them. I don't know. Have you heard of those two? That
I've used TB 500 and BPC. I've used GHRP. I've used GHRP 286. I've used melanotan. Melanotan is probably the most promising of all of them. I mean, can't really. I'm kind of washed out right now, but my pigment has permanently changed because of melanotan, which is good because my dad had skin cancer at one point. So that's what that drug is, or that peptide is being used for, is skin cancer research, and it is really promising. BPC, I didn't really notice much with BPC or TB. I tried them, I think, in my shoulder and my knee for nagging injuries. One thing you got to remember with nagging injury, I think peptides maybe have some application. I don't know if we know the proper application yet, and I still think there's research to be done. I think same with a lot of these substances. The things that usually work the best are also the things that have a lot of research behind them. A lot of people have used them for a lot of years.
Right.
I think they came out as like this thing is going to be super promising, but they're not as. You could pretty much accomplish most things with anabolics that you could with peptides or or dietary intervention or other things like that. So I don't know. They probably have some application. One thing I will say is that with injuries, 70% of injuries spontaneously heal themselves. So if you have a nagging injury, you got to eliminate the source. So if you're doing a fucking tricep extension and your elbow is painful and you don't feel it in your tricep, don't do the fucking tricep extension. Yeah. Find exercises that find pain-free movements. So find movements that don't exacerbate that actual problem and cause that injury to hurt, and maybe have some rehabilitation period. A good person to look at is Dr. Stuart McGill on this. He has a book. But just remember that before you go in thinking about injecting something into your body, why not try a dietary intervention? Or that's how I always look at anything, is try a dietary intervention, try actually looking at the source of the problem. A lot of the time people are doing these exercises because they feel like they have to do a skull crusher and it destroys their elbows. It's like, no, get rid of that exercise, do something else. So eliminate the source, and most injuries spontaneously heal themselves. So that's my answer to that. Tiger is asking about if he wanted to do a physique show. He's 85 kilos. I would need much more information than that. I would probably weigh out not competing this year just because of everything going on. You don't know for certain if anything's going to happen. I had like 4 shows picked out, and every single one got either canceled or pushed back. So I would probably just take it the year off to grow. Are Sarms a better alternative for women due to their lesser androgenicity?
Sarms work differently, and they're a ligand. They kind of bind to they're selective androgenic receptor modulator. So the ligand, it binds to specific tissue, in this case muscle tissue, which is different from testosterone. Testosterone, or hormones at least, testosterone affects way more than just muscles. It affects it's a sex hormone, so it affects
because these hormones are less androgenic, so they don't cause those side effects.
So I mean, there's still there is a good amount of studies on SARMs, certain ones, but I've taken a SARM too. I've taken some SARMs, and I do see results. I like them. I would say in terms of using them for women, it sounds like it should be fine because they're like, it binds specifically to muscle tissue, so it shouldn't affect anything hormonally or anything like that. It could have very minor effects. They say SARMs are suppressive, but with the science they provide, they really shouldn't be.
My buddy who asked this question was showing me some studies, and he was saying that when they are studying it, though, they're usually using very low doses, not compared to what is normally being taken. But that being said, if you are a female, you probably don't need that much of a dose anyway. I think it's probably smart to run a PCT if you use anything that enhances muscle. Usually, it's pretty much across the board. There's some suppression that happens with everything, But I would say probably potential and good alternative. Do you know, like, what's the androgenicity of like Anavar? Do you know that?
I want to say it's really low. I think it's more anabolic than it is androgen. I want to say it's super low compared to testosterone.
My argument would be that how is that ratio compared? Is there enough anabolic activity with Anavar and low enough androgenicity to maybe that's still a better option? Seems like SARMs are just like very, very mild steroids, right? Not the way they function, but what the end result really, and some of the pathways. Right. So I would be, my question is, like, in a lot of the cases, I would just recommend actual steroids for people who are looking at SARMs. One, because there's more research out on actual steroids, so we can draw better conclusions based on them. And two, just maybe based on that potential ratio, how is that? Is a female taking Anavar going to get more gains and less androgenicity versus a SARM? So it's better bang for your buck. Maybe a little bit less impact on your lipids. I think all drugs, all anabolics impact your lipids in some negative way.
They do.
But I would like to see more research, to be honest, in peptides, in prohormones, in SARMs as well, to even touch them. Mm-hmm. Personally,
the tough part too is the funding for them. You don't.
It's even with anabolics, dude. It's like I was trying to look up trenbolone studies, and they were studying like amoeba or some shit. I'm like, the fuck how am I gonna apply an amoeba to my body?
Exactly. A lot of it's they use E. coli. They use like just these designer things.
Cattle,
because
that's what the trenbolone originated for. But it's frustrating. If there's some studies, I'll definitely be a participant in some trenbolone. Well, not trenbolone. I hate trenbolone, but maybe some other stuff. Um, would you rather juice veggies for life or juice high doses of gear for life? This is two different people asking very similar questions.
What is it?
Juice veggies or juice high doses of gear?
I mean, in this case, might as well just do those veggies, depending on what your goal is, I guess.
Yeah, well, you know what? I saw this and I was like, he didn't specify. I can still juice veggies and eat meat. Like he just said juice veggies for life. I'm like, okay, well, I'll just juice all my veggies and eat my steak. Definitely, I'm not someone who believes in high doses of gear, and I think that's what really does kill people in the long run. So, or causes the most side effects. So, yeah, I would probably just go with the juice and veggies. If it was I only could have juiced veggies, honestly, I would probably take my chances. You know what though? It's hard to say.
It depends on dosage, I guess, because you could always, it depends on.
Yeah, I mean, I think one is gonna. No, both are gonna ruin your quality of life. To be honest, I feel like if you're just juicing veggies, you're gonna have a lot of micronutrient deficiencies, so you're probably not gonna feel super good. As far as sustainability, probably the juicing veggies long term would be the best way, to actually have some health and sustainability. But I as far as like what I've seen with like research about like just like vegan diets and stuff like that, I would probably say that you know they're not necessarily unhealthy when done properly, but they're not necessarily the most optimal for anything. So I would definitely just probably still stick with the juicing veggies because I don't like how I feel on gear at all. So I can't even imagine going upwards of 1.5, 2 grams high dose, like what I would consider high doses, because I would probably feel terrible all the time.
Yeah. God, the side effects, I can only imagine.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think people underestimate that. They're just like, oh yeah, I'm just going to take a bunch of gear and get huge, when they're thinking about, training, and when they're like getting started, they're like, I'm going to take gear. I'm sure a lot of people at your college are like, yeah, I'm just going to take a test cycle. And you're like,
yeah,
man, there's so many things that go along with that, man. There's psychological side effects. There's depression, anxiety. There's, depending on if you are someone who's subjected to that normally anyway, it's like these hormones exacerbate. I don't even know how to pronounce that word. They amplify the whoever you are and the problems that you have, like physically, mentally. So people underestimate that. Like if you are like, they make me lethargic, they increase my anxiety, they increase my depression, and I have to be really, really careful about those things. So if you're someone who doesn't have those things under control, terrible decision to take enhancements.
Yeah, I agree.
Your brother Brandon Bolino asks, what's your favorite quote from the movie Silence of the Lambs?
Shit, dude, I actually just wrote a paper for his dumbass for it. So.
Oh, is that one?
Yeah. He just he had to do a paper on it so he could finish his last class. He's like, dude, I got to do a movie. And I'm like, all right, well, just do Silence of the Lambs. It's super easy. There's a lot of it's like a
so you fucking know you've been watching the movie then?
Dude, yeah, I've seen that movie so many times. There's so many good quotes in it. But what a question. Have you seen that movie?
Yeah, I've seen that movie a bunch of times.
What's your favorite quote?
Honestly, I can't. I know Hannibal, whatever his name is, has some good quotes in there, like a lot of good quotes. But the one that I always remember is it puts a lotion in the fucking basket.
Yeah. Put the fucking lotion in the basket. Yeah, that's my favorite too.
And she's like just screaming at him, and he's
screaming. And then the craziest part is when he's like tilted his head, and he just fucking yells it. You know what I'm saying? Because you're like, whoa. But that is for sure one of the best quotes. It rubs the lotion on the skin, or else it gets the hose again. Yeah, it's so funny, dude.
Yeah, that's a great movie. No, I want to go back and rewatch that now.
Yeah.
How's Brandon doing? I haven't talked to him for a long time.
He's good. He's doing TSA, working TSA, San Francisco.
Oh, nice.
Just graduated.
Sweet.
So probably get a job.
Yeah, I'd love to say hi to your family if you guys are all around sometime.
Oh yeah, they just went to Huntington. Actually, they went to Huntington this.
Yeah. Oh, it's nice.
It's cool. The pool's warm, Dylan. Pool's warm. You gotta
I'll go jump in. Fuck it.
Yeah.
What's your favorite fast food chain? That was asked by Isaiah Hugo. Isaiah Hugo? I don't know.
Fast food chain? Oh man. Probably Taco Bell.
Really, Taco Bell?
Taco Bell has to
I've lightened my stance on Taco Bell because I learned they cook their food in lard.
Yeah.
I'm totally anti-vegetable oil from like what I've seen about vegetable oils.
There's a lot of studies coming out with vegetables, oils, and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, watch Oiling of America if you ever get time. It's on YouTube. It's like an old movie about, or not old, but she's going into the research on how lobbyists pushed margarine and vegetable oils, and how vegetable oils are just like byproducts of basically like uh, machine work and factory work and stuff like that, and basically how the rise of heart disease is
for sure,
highly correlated with that.
What of trans fat and stuff like that?
Trans fat is one of them, but now we're also learning trans fat is the consensus is pretty much out that trans fat's bad, right? But now we're learning that vegetable oils are, but it's, you know how long it's going to fucking take. If you literally look at any packaged food, there's vegetable oil in it. Like it's going to take, so, you know, how much money is going against that argument, like billions of dollars. So it's like, it's gonna be so long before we can get a consensus on that, because these lobbyists and these big corporations have so much influence on that, and a lot of the time have influence on the studies. That's why I was saying watch that documentary, because she talks about how these studies were funded by a lot of these companies, you know, that are saying vegetable oils are good. So it's going to take a while. I mean, that's the case with a lot of things like saturated fat demonization, which is now starting to get different light put on it, because we're actually, you know, doing unbiased research. But get all, I haven't had Taco Bell for a minute, but I would say, and they do use vegetable oil, but I would say In-N-Out is just like a consistent one for me. Like, it's very simple, but it's always like, it always hits the spot, and it's cheap too. So
yeah, In-N-Out's nice. In-N-Out's really nice.
In-N-Out is probably the only exception I'll make really at this point too, for like fast food. I don't really eat a whole lot out because of how scared I am of vegetable oils and like inflammatory markers and things like that. I'd rather just cook shit at home, to be honest. But yeah, In-N-Out's my go-to now.
A lot of fat in In-N-Out, but
yep. No, I don't even really do cheat meals anymore, to be honest, dude. It's like I just got way too fat so many times, and obviously I think it has impacted my health a little bit. So I just try to stick to my clean food, and every once in a while have a nice meal out.
It feels better eating clean, you know, because like
I feel better once you understand nutrition. You start to realize like you start to think differently about like what you consume. Once you understand like the mechanisms, how everything works, you start to think different. And that's why I think it's so important to like educate people when they're young. And it's something I really want to do in the future, is like have an opportunity to like educate like people at like school, like young children, about nutrition. Because like once you start understanding like what these things do to your body, especially like over consuming foods and you know, the wrong types of foods, low micronutrition, not exercising, you start to look at things differently. And it's like I have like when I put something on my mouth, I weigh out the risk to reward of me eating that thing, you know. And it's like, it's not like I'm like psychotic about it, but I know, and I'm conscious and aware, and I just don't desire those things as much. It's really weird. Like I like them, you know, they taste good, but it's like my desire for them is much lower now that I understand this isn't going to really support my goals and my health really. So, you know, I think of things differently, I guess, now.
Yeah, and then you just feel like shit after, you know. You're like, God.
You feel like shit. I think I've just associated how I feel when I eat that food. So it's like I know I pay really close attention to my digestion. So if I eat something and 2 hours later I feel like shit, I remember that, and I'm like, okay, I remember the last time I ate that, I felt terrible after it. Is that worth it to me? You know, and that's going to affect other things like my, you know, my ability to work and train and stuff. And I'm sure there's cognitive things that I don't recognize that definitely are impacted by that as well. You know, other areas of my, you know, my mental clarity and things like that. All right, I think that's it. I don't think I skipped anything. Let's see. Oh, I didn't ask this one. Opinion on PDE5 inhibitors pre-workout. You know PDE5 inhibitors are, right?
No.
Viagra, Cialis as a pre-workout or an intro. Do you know anything about like the mechanisms of action there, or?
I would assume a lot of those mechanisms of action is just like vasodilation, stuff like that.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So that's what.
I mean, honestly, it could be really good to you know, in terms of anything vasodilation wise is actually really good pre, just because you're getting more nutrients to the cells, to the muscles, stuff like that. Stuff like that. I mean, I guess it'll be like a nitric oxide type.
Yeah, I was reading a little bit about it. I haven't really looked into it a whole lot, but yeah, nitric oxide is production, I think, or however that works. Yeah, I've taken both Viagra and Cialis pre-workout before. Didn't like how they made me feel. So I think I've heard the argument here is like, oh, it's specific to I don't know what the term, the technical term is, but like your genitals, like it's specific to
Right.
that area.
Right.
But I don't think it is. No,
I don't think it
it's
is.
just vasodilation,
Right.
like you said. And
Yeah.
so I would assume that it would be good for like muscle pump and getting also delivery of nutrients. I know I used to do John Meadows programs, and he would actually put his whole daily nutrition in some of them.
Oh, yeah,
And he
yeah.
would put, I took a half tab of Cialis, and my pumps were great.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't really notice anything too like noticeable when I took it. I did get like a sinus headache and sinus pressure, and that really fucking bugs me. Like I'll have a headache for a day, especially Cialis because the half life is really long. So
Is it?
maybe I would use a Viagra, but I think I don't really notice like sexual benefits from Cialis or Viagra. I don't really notice a whole lot training, and I think it's just because like I don't have any problems with like sexual performance, and I don't have any like my nutrition's pretty good. So
Yeah.
it's like I think a lot of those times people use them in because they have a deficiency. Like if you have decadic, like you have high prolactin, high progesterone, maybe a Cialis might work. And if you have poor muscle pumps because you're sodium deficient, maybe a Cialis might work using a different mechanism. But I've noticed very little because I always have good salt. My prolactin's usually under control. I don't have like sexual side effects usually from taking anabolics. So I would probably, before you go to look at taking one of those things, look at your nutrition, do a panel of blood work, check your progesterone, check
Yeah.
your hormones, make sure your hormone levels are good. And then maybe incorporate a really low dose, because I've even taken I haven't taken as low as a quarter of a dose, but I've taken a half dose and I still get the sinus pressure, and it's not super noticeable for me, just because everything else is kind of covered, I think, is the situation. People notice that a lot with like creatine and some of these other things. It's like creatine you can get from your food.
Yeah.
A lot of these pump products,
Right.
L-arginine and things like that, I think they have promising benefits. But I think if you're taking care of your nutrition, a lot of these things are already in the food you eat. So if your nutrition's on point, yeah, you eat a steak, you have creatine. L-arginine is an amino acid, which is, if you eat a complete protein, you get
it.
So,
Yeah. That's what a lot of people don't understand too. Is the amino acids. Oh, what do you think of? Oh, my protein has amino acids. That's what protein is.
Yeah, that's what protein is. Yeah, exactly.
Proteins are amino acids build up, So.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're getting adequate nutrition, a lot of the time you don't need to take one amino acid or take one thing, and maybe some things are beneficial like vitamin D3 and a couple other things, but usually it's just look at the macro first. Look at, am I getting enough sodium? Am I getting enough water? Am I getting enough protein? Usually you get most of those things out of the way, you're good to go.
You shouldn't have any problems. Yeah, if your hormones are in check, if everything's like good,
if you aren't getting pumps and you have enough food, then there's potentially something wrong, and you need to look at that instead of taking. It's like, take a proactive approach. Like be proactive about your problems. Don't be reactive. That's what bodybuilding and what I'm trying to get away with, especially with this podcast, is like, let's step away from reactive bodybuilding. Your T3 is low, or your T3 is low. Oh, here's some T3. You'll burn more fat in a contest prep. No, why is your T3 low? Like, what, are you deficient in something? You're not getting pumps in the gym. That's really odd. You're young and you're healthy, and that doesn't make any sense. Let's look at your sodium intake. Let's look at your actual sodium and potassium concentrations in your blood. I would love to step away from that. I mean, in medicine in general, step away from that reactive approach of just, here's some drugs.
Yeah. Well, that's a good part too, especially now is they're starting to dive more into nutrition and say, well, why haven't we been looking at this? In pharmacology. So
it's partially, I mean, I don't want to speak too much on the medical system because I don't know a whole lot about it, but I think it's partially just the way it's set up. There's very little nutrition courses in school. You're not incentivized. What were you saying?
Nutrition policy is super low. I mean, like, think about what you eat. Remember what we used to eat at like El Toro and all that? We used to.
Oh yeah, no. Oh my, that's another thing. I did another thing in high school where they had the board members come in, and they were like, pose a question for the board members. So I was like, I'm totally, especially, I think a big way to fix the obesity epidemic is way down the line. So it's like, help kids before they get older, because they're going to carry those habits, because a lot of it is habitual, is good nutrition. And I was asking the board members, it was like, I went to the board website or the school district website, and it said, our meals are based on getting the most nutrition to our students, and so they can have healthy, development, healthy learning, and blah, blah, blah. And I basically quoted that, and I was like, as far as the food I've seen people eating, there's no regard for health. There's no regard for nutrition or a balanced diet. you know, and I asked them, what can you do to maybe help fix this problem so we can, you know, because I basically said these habits carry on people for the rest of their life, and they all fucking dodged the question. Every single, it was so disappointing for me. Like, I was kind of, that was where I was like, part of me was like just so through with everything in high school at that point. I think that was probably my junior year. I kind of shut down after that. I was like, you know what, fuck all this.
I remember
This
you
is bullshit.
came, you ate, you did your thing, and then you
That's literally what I did, man. I would go to a table, eat by myself. Usually you would join me. That was about it, man. It was just so.
That's why when you left, I said, "Fuck, dude, I might as well start doing that too." You know?
Yeah. I feel bad. I left you there.
I used to come back, just eat, just do my thing, you know?
Yeah. I was kind of fed up with everything at that point, but yeah, no, and then they all dodged the question. They're like, the one lady was, I hate to say this, she was obese. And she's like, let's not call anybody out here. And I was like, I wasn't fucking calling anybody out. I was just saying, what can you do to fix this problem?
Did you just call me fat? Did you just call me fat?
Literally.
Like,
oh my God.
It's important.
It's literally what happened. And then they were all just like, oh, that's not our problem. Someone else would deal with that. And I'm like, you're being elected for the fucking school board. Like, you would have some say in that shit. But
you at least know who to contact, you know? It's probably all comes down to like profit and stuff. Oh, well, we don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's a system. The way it's set up is that there's no regard for that shit, and even in the medical system, it needs reform. Like it does. Oh yeah, one thing I wanted to. I'm gonna get you off here. Sorry, I'm taking so long.
No,
what would you like to see changed in your education? Like I had some pitfalls that I didn't like about school. I don't think it overall is bad, but there's definitely some things I was frustrated with. You actually going to school, what would you like to see change in the education field?
I think there's one major thing is how broad the education field actually is. You know, when I did biochemistry, I learned a lot, but it was all very broad. You know, what cells do, what all this stuff does. But we, you know, if in terms of like, let's say right now I've received my bachelor's, I could go get a job and stuff. It's great, but I would like to know more specifics. You know, I wish they kind of came in and said, all right, well, you're doing biochemistry. What about biochemistry intrigues you? Because there's biochemistry, you could go on forever. You know, so I didn't learn too much about muscle physiology or
the things that you wanted to learn about.
How does you know, muscle nutrition work? How do your muscle cells work? You know, we learned a lot about just cells in general. We learned muscle cells, fat cells, epithelial cells, all these certain things, but we learned very broadly about them. You know, so if I think the best approach, and this is only, you know, my opinion, but if you know, you always have this bigger major, and then it'd be nice if you could put a specific on it, you know, like, because my thing is I'm biochemistry. I learned a lot about biochemistry, but I didn't learn specifics on stuff I wanted to learn about, you know. And I'm doing biotechnology masters. It gets kind of specifics once you do your masters, you know. All right, what do you want to do exactly now?
Way in,
which is way in, you know. I could go get a job right now, and I know very broad things, but I don't know specifics, which in masters is cool that I'm doing genomics, because I can only imagine how much more I'm going to learn. But
you're so much more invested in the process,
right?
Because of that.
If they could introduce that earlier, maybe even in high school, like I think after, you know, freshman, sophomore year, you learn the broads. Junior year, they should start. All right, what are you thinking about for college? What are the specific?
Or even just like, what do you like to do? What are you fucking interested in?
Right, because a lot of things change, you know, and that would suck. Like a lot of my friends, especially in sciences, they're doing science, and they're like, I actually don't really like this stuff. You know, it's kind of hard, this, that, or it's not what I want to do. It sucks, because then you waste your time, especially in college, you know, where you're paying a bunch of money.
And money too. Fuck.
Yeah, so if they could, that would be great if they could make it more specific, you know.
Yeah, I agree 100%, and that's exactly what I do right now. Is I'm specializing. You know, that's literally what am I literally interested in, and what is really applicable to me or like my clients, and that's what I learn. That's what I go research, and I learn something else, and there's something that piggybacks off that, I go research that.
Right.
I agree 100%, and I think that was one of my frustrations, like why I kind of just quit on school altogether. And I tried going back a couple times, and your compliance and your adherence to school is definitely partially predicated on the fact that you're actually educated, you're actually interested in the material. So like there are people who are just fucking miserable all the time because they're not actually invested in the subject matter they're learning. I mean, when I fucking pick up this book that I showed you, like I'm 100% invested. I'm like, holy shit, that's so cool. Like I can't believe this does that. You know what I mean? The problem with me, I mean, it's not necessarily a problem, is I threw in the towel much earlier. Like I was just like, you know what, fuck this. I don't like learning this. This is a waste of my time. I have to spend, you know, how many hours of my week trying to learn shit that I just never feel like I'm gonna apply. A lot of the time you hear these people in the field, they're like, I've never used half the shit I learned. And it's like, fuck.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's a big thing too, because I'm doing stuff like organic chemistry, which is very important. But then I'm also taking like a CH, like a history class. And I'm like, I can't focus hard on what I need to focus on.
You're strung out really thin, and you're also like, what the fuck is this going to be relevant to my field?
Right.
Like, oh, don't get me wrong, some of the stuff's interesting for sure, but it's like, what the fuck am I gonna, you know?
Yeah,
how is George Washington gonna help me with my fucking epigenetics? Like, he's gonna help with the genome sequencing.
Exactly. Oh, Thomas Jefferson. I need to do organic chemistry, right? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I wish, and that's a problem, because I think what they want to do, I mean, they're trying to generalize everything. Oh, well, we introduce more courses.
We want you to be more, we want you to be more like hireable, which is like the worst means to an end. I think it should be more of like, we want you. Never the argument is like, you never hear a counselor say, I want you to be happy. It's like, no, we want you to be able to be hired by most people, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's like, dude, like, but also take into account.
And people don't do it, which sucks, because like a lot of times I'm just like, I'm taking things and I'm like, well, I'm not even paying attention because I'm not interested in it. And then I feel, it's like,
and then you're either like, fuck, I gotta, now cram study this subject, or I gotta just try to get by in this class, and it's just like a waste of everybody's time and money. And fuck, I agree, 100%. But I mean, I definitely respect the fact that you've gotten that far, man. It's a huge accomplishment.
Thanks.
I haven't been able to do, so
it's been incredible, honestly. Everything's been great, like the fact that trust me, the amount of knowledge, you're already up here,
Hey, same to you, man.
So it's really interesting to see, a lot of people, the misconception, oh, I have to go to university, I have to do this, I have to do that. There's no you have to do anything, man. Just do, if your field maybe requires you having a degree, then that's definitely important. But like, obviously my field didn't, so I was like, the amount of knowledge you could learn just from specifically just looking at studies is
looking at studies, looking at people. I you know what I did is I looked at the people who review the studies, because then they understand the terminology even more, and then they can break it down into dummy terms, and I'm like, oh shit, okay, that makes sense to me. And that's if I ever go on YouTube, that's what I'm looking at. I'm not looking at all these bullshit people. You try to find those people, seek them out, and then get their information from them. And then that's how I've learned the majority of my knowledge. And then I find and I buy their products and I buy their books and shit like that, and that's where I get a lot of my knowledge. But so it's like concentrated, like you said, it's very specialized. I'm just like, I go to this person, get all of their information, and then apply what I want, throw out what I don't.
And the more passion you have for it, the more you're interested in it. There's many science classes too. I took biophysical chemistry. You know what I'm saying? And I remember, I'm like, God, this is so hard, and like, I don't think I'll ever use this.
That's hard, and you don't fucking are interested. That's the terrible combination.
And I was like, man, this is gonna be tough. So if they could just say, hey, look, well, you're interested in muscle building and physique, certain things, let's dive right into the science of it. We'll give you a little more, we'll give
you the prereqs, but do you really need to be taking trig for muscle building? Probably not.
Yeah, probably not at all. So
yeah, exactly.
If they did that, I think the education
I would probably be in school if they did that. Yeah.
100%. I think a lot of people, I mean, it's insane. Like a lot of people, that's one thing, a huge misconception. Everybody's always interested in something. Let them learn about it. The misconception that you have to introduce a bunch of different things. I don't know if it's for like, oh, well, maybe you'll be interested in this.
Right. And then telling people when they are interested in something, oh, maybe that's not realistic. Maybe you should just go to school.
Yeah.
Like that also bugs me. It's like, just, if like social media is a great example. It's if you fucking, you love making posts on social media and you love building a brand, there's a science to that. There's stuff to be learned. I mean, I fucking learn something every day about human interaction, communication, and how social media works. I mean, there's people in other people's ears, like their parents and stuff, saying that's not realistic. Don't do that shit. Go to school, get a business degree, and they're fucking miserable. So
go get a degree and get a job. But it's like, all right, well, now I'm fucking miserable. Yeah, now I'm just.
And there's no means to the end. It's like you just keep getting. Oh, I got the job. Now what? I fucking buy a nice house, and it's like you're just never fucking fulfilled.
You're just kind of. It's like when you're lifting and you're just kind of fucking curling, or you're just going through the motion.
Just fucking going through life.
Motion, never go through the motion. That's the thing.
Yeah. All right, well, let's wrap this up. I appreciate being on for so long. Honestly, I would love to have you on. Maybe we can talk about more specific things in the future. When you have time, I don't want to pull away from your school too much, but that'd be awesome, man.
Dude, 100%.
Really enjoy doing this.
Dive way you know, deeper.
This is what we do when we meet up anyway. We just fucking talk for how many hours about bullshit.
Yeah. You know, it's always a good time. I'll tell you that.
Definitely. Cool, man. Well, good luck with school. Keep me updated on everything. You know, if you got questions on training and stuff and you want to talk, shoot me a text.
I'll come to you for sure. You know that.
Cool, man.
All right, Dylan. Thanks for having me, man. It's been great.
Man. Awesome. I'll talk to you soon, bro.
100%. Take care.
See you.